Recording in prog. Recording stopped.
Good morning, everyone. I can't see you this morning. I was going to say it's great to see you. I guess that's what I would normally say, but we're glad if you can join us. We're glad to have you this morning. Hope that all of you are doing well at home and staying warm and safe. This morning, since we can't be together, we at least want to share some thoughts from God's Word, some things that I've had on my mind that I think we might could all benefit from. So this morning, as we go through our what I've got prepared, I hope that it's encouraging to you. I don't know about you, but I don't watch a lot of TV. I haven't for several years, but we have watched some over the last year, especially since we've had Amelia and been able to be at home a little bit more. But have you ever thought about how chaotic it seems in some of these shows or some of these movies, and how they seem to make decisions that affect their lives in negative ways, and some of them on a seemingly continual basis? It's kind of mind-blowing to me to think, wow, just the weight of the decisions that you just made, you don't even think about. You're just doing them. What about the last family gathering that you had, or gathering you had with some colleagues, or even when you just had some friends that got together? Have you sat back and watched any drama play out? I mean, we all know that there's never any drama at family get-togethers. But what about just someone else's decisions that have led to something that just makes you shake your head and think, what in the world are you thinking? Are you doing? I have a thought for you. Have you ever considered how much these people, and when I say these people, it might even be you, it might even be me. Have you ever considered how much these people need God, need Jesus in their life? Have you ever thought about how much better God's ways are than our ways, than man's ways? Have you been thankful for God's plan and how much better the life is that is laid out for us in His Word than the life of those around us that are seeking what feels good and what feels right to them, in the time, in the moment? This morning, I want to look at a few examples from the Bible, from people that did some things God's way and some people that didn't do things God's way. So I hope that our study this morning will be profitable for you. And instead of focusing on what you see in others, what you see in these people that we read about from history, try to think about how you see yourself in that situation. Think about where am I in this particular situation? We hope you'll get your Bible out with us and study with us this morning. I will be reading from the ESV, will be all of my reading this morning. So we hope that you'll join us in that. Our first story we're going to look at is going to be out of Genesis. Genesis 45 is where we will be if you want to turn there right now and just kind of wait until we're ready to read. But this is the backstory, or this is the story of Joseph. And we know that Joseph had started out life. He was the youngest child of his father and favored seemingly from his brother's eyes, and a lot of envy there. And some of them wanted to kill him. They ended up selling him into slavery, and his father had no idea what had happened to him. And he goes off to Egypt. He has some trouble through various things that have happened, and eventually makes his way into Pharaoh's household and becomes arguably the second most powerful person in the world at the time, only second to Pharaoh. And at this time in Genesis 45, his brothers had come down from Canaan, and his father said, go, we've heard that there's grain in Egypt, go and get some. So they're in the second year of the drought that was foreseen by Joseph interpreted the dream and had managed the grain, and so that's where his brothers were coming to buy that grain. When they get there, Joseph makes them very nervous from the first minute that he saw them in Egypt, especially when he told them, "Hey, you need to bring your younger brother down here." And after they revealed that they had younger brothers, you need to bring him down here. Joseph wanted to see if they had really changed, if they had really had um, a mindset change and matured, and how they cared for each other and how they treated each other as family. So in chapter 45, we finally get to that last round of secrecy that Joseph holds back from them. And we'll read verses 4 through 8 here in Genesis 45. So Joseph said to his brothers, "Come near to me, please." And they came near, and he said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh and Lord of all his house and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go to my father and say to him," well, that's where I'm going to stop there. So Joseph's revelation to them is filled with really care and concern, not what you would think of being blame, not hatred, not despising them for what they've done. He is caring for them. He is having an attitude of forgiveness towards them. Let's continue on and read in verses 14 and 15 of Genesis 45. Says, "Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. And he kissed all of his brothers and wept upon them. After that, his brothers talked with him." Joseph undoubtedly showed compassion to his brothers. He was in that position of authority. He had the power to do whatever he wanted to do. He could have had them thrown in jail. He could have had them killed. He could have had them exiled. He could have enslaved them. He had all of the power in his hand. He held all the cards. Yet he chose forgiveness, not hatred, not revenge. So my question for you is, how does this apply to you? When you're wronged, what's your attitude about being wronged? When you are the one that is in the wrong, are you humble enough to realize that the problem is you? I know people that are grudge holders. They can't forgive someone no matter what. And it's sad that they might not ever change, and they might not ever have that feeling of peace. I see this in family members. I see it in brothers and sisters in Christ, people doing business together. I know people that have been in the wrong, and they will not admit that they are wrong no matter what. Their pride is too great. They will not seek forgiveness. These same individuals we just talked about, our family members, our brothers and sisters in Christ, our people that we do business with, we see this all the time, and this may even be us. These states definitely lead to tense relationships. I mean, we probably have all seen that. We've seen those estranged relationships where there's hatred, where there's envy, and the sad reality is people then have to work their lives around these stupid, senseless things because pride, because of they cannot put the fact that they are wrong first. It can affect the rest of our lives, but it can also affect our soul. It's not worth our soul in holding a grudge and not seeking forgiveness. You know, it's a sad life to live in a state like this. I've been through both of these states at times in my life. And when I realized that I must get over this, I must make it right, that is when it became so much better for me. And I felt the relief, the weight that was taken off my chest when I came to that realization. Now, Matthew 18, it tells us that we are to go to our brother when we have a problem with them. What we have to realize is that actually means that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to go to our brother, not read about it and then think, I'm just going to talk about it to so and so. It means we're actually supposed to go to our brother. We're really supposed to do that. Be the better person, even if the other party is not willing. Paul tells us in Romans 12 and verses 20 and 21 that by doing good to people, that we will heap burning coals upon their head. So he says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. God's way is better. Even being forgiving is doing it God's way. Moving into our next subject is truthfulness. I forgot I was going to share got a PowerPoint here that I was going to share. I'll share that real quick. And so our first point was forgiveness and doing it. That is God's way. Our second point is going to be truthfulness. For truthfulness, we're going to go to 2 Kings chapter 5. 2 Kings chapter 5. Second Kings chapter 5, it's a story we're all familiar with. Naaman has leprosy. He's been told about Elisha, that Elisha can heal him. And so he goes, and Elisha says, yeah, go bathe and dip in the Jordan 7 times. And Naaman says, no way. Does Damascus not have better rivers than the Jordan River? And he's finally persuaded to do what he's told by his traveling companions, and he's healed. Then he comes back to Elisha, offers him gifts, and tries to give him something for making him better. But Elisha refuses those gifts. And that's where we're going to start reading in verses 19 of 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 19 through 23. So halfway through 19, it says, but when Naaman had gone from him a short distance, Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said, see, my master has spared this Naaman the Syrian in not accepting from his hand what he brought. As the Lord lives, I will run after him, and I will get something from him. So Gehazi followed Naaman, and when Naaman saw someone running after him, he got down from the chariot to meet him and said, is all well? And he said, all is well. My master has sent me to say, there have just now come to me from the hill country of Ephraim 2 young men of the sons of the prophets. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of clothing. And Naaman said, be pleased to accept 2 talents. And he urged him and tied up 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 changes of clothing and laid them on his 2 servants. And they carried them before Gehazi. Desire has its grip on Gehazi. He says, if Elisha won't take what Naaman has, I will take it. Let's continue in verse 24. And when he came to the hill, he took them from their hand and he put them in his house, and he sent the men away, and they departed. So he wants, let's get those put away and make sure that hopefully nobody sees what's going on. He went in and stood before his master, and Elisha said to him, where have you been, Gehazi? And he said, your servant went nowhere. But he said to him, did not my heart go when the man turned from his chariot to meet you? Was it a time to accept money and garments, olive orchards and vineyards, sheep and oxen, male servants and female servants? Therefore, the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and to your descendants forever. So he went out from his presence, a leper like snow. We don't know anything really about Gehazi except for this one part of his life, to my knowledge. There's one thing about it, though. He made a decision to lie. He made a decision to not be truthful about the situation, and he and his family will pay for that decision. Imagine how this might have turned out differently if he was truthful. His life probably wouldn't have taken the turn for the worse that it did. When you make it a point to be truthful, you are making things easier for yourself for the future. When you lie, you are making life harder than it needs to be. When you're making life harder on yourself, you're also making life harder on the people around you. Think about a time when you've not been truthful. If we're honest, we all have those times where there's something that was said or done that you did that haunts us. I know that definitely there's several things that come to mind when I think about that. But whether you've stolen something, whether you've kept thoughts or actions from your spouse or someone you love, whether you've lied to get through a situation, whether you might have just cheated on a test at school, there's something that all of us could have done, that the list goes on and on. If you hadn't done that thing that haunts you, your life would be different. I can look back on that list knowing that I have done all of those things that I just mentioned. And I can confidently say that if I had done it God's way, I wouldn't have faced near the stress, near the lost sleep, near the guilt. God's way is better. Being truthful is doing it God's way. For our last point this morning, I want to talk about marriage and sexual purity. The story we're going to go to start out with is 2 Samuel chapter 11. And again, we're all familiar with this story. It's David and Bathsheba. And David was a man who liked women, and he had at least 8 wives that we know of, and he had at least 10 concubines. Let's read from 2 Samuel chapter 11, verses 2 through 4. It happened late one afternoon when David arose from his couch and was walking on the roof of the king's house that he saw from the roof a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. And David sent and inquired about the woman, and one said, "Is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" And David said to his messengers, sent his messengers, and took her, and she came to him and lay with her. David had 7 wives already, but this one he desired, apparently more than he desired his current wives. Just this one situation caused him to murder his loyal servant Uriah, and it caused his child to die. Those are just the things that we know about from this one particular incident. We don't know how that affected the feelings of his family, the problems that it could have caused within his household. We don't know any of those things. Deuteronomy 17:17 tells us that it says that kings shouldn't have many wives, lest his heart turn away. David chose to do it his way, not to do it God's way. We oftentimes focus on this part of David's marriages and consequences, and this story really comes to the top when we think about these things. But think about all the family trouble that David's family endures in the years to come because of the decisions that he's made, the multiple wives that he's had, the decision to take Bathsheba. We've already talked about 2 of those consequences, but then you've got Amnon defiling Tamar. You got Absalom killing Amnon for defiling Tamar. Absalom goes on to rebel against David and try to take his kingdom over. And then Absalom took David's 10 concubines and he slept with them in public. Everybody knew about it. This is like a soap opera. Then consider his son Solomon. 1 Kings 4:30 says that Solomon's wisdom surpassed all of the people of the East and all of the wisdom of Egypt. So Solomon was a wise man. Yet, one thing about it, David sure didn't set the stage for Solomon, didn't set a good example for Solomon, because he clearly didn't stick to the do not acquire many wives for yourself that we see in Deuteronomy 17. Then Solomon took that to a whole new level. Let's turn to 1 Kings chapter 11. 1 Kings chapter 11. In 1 Kings chapter 11, we're going to read verses 3 and 4. This is about Solomon taking the wives to a whole new level. He had 700 wives who were princesses and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. For when Solomon was old, his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not wholly true to the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. 700 wives and 300 concubines. I can't even. It turned away his heart. We've pictured both the mistakes of Solomon and David when it comes to their marriages, to their sexual purity. Now let's take a look at God's way. Let's picture God's way. Genesis 2:24 tells us what it was like from the beginning. It's that God had meant for two to become one flesh. Now let's turn over to Matthew chapter 19. Matthew chapter 19, and we're going to read verses 8 and 9. Jesus had just finished referring to the Genesis chapter 2, verses 24 that we talked about just briefly. And in Matthew 19, we're going to read verses 8 and 9. This is where the Pharisees are questioning Jesus about divorce. And he says to them in verse 8 of Matthew 19, he said to them, because of your hardness of your heart, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives. But from the beginning, it was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery. Moses allowed you to divorce your wife because it was the hardest of your heart, because it was what you wanted to do, not because it was the way it was from the beginning, because from the beginning it was not so. God's way is to be with your wife, to have your heart and your mind on your marriage and not to be shared with anyone else. Now, this is a subject that affects all of us. We have people in our own families that have made these same mistakes, and it may even be one of us that is listening today. And it's not something that we can ignore. One other thing to think about on this is it's not just for married people. Young people need to listen to this as well. People that aren't married, people that are looking forward to getting married one day potentially, because we have things, we have pornography, we have social media, we have the pressure of everyone around us being sexually active and just throwing that out there for everyone to see. And there's no question that doesn't make it easy for someone who's not married or someone who's younger. I know because I've been there not so long ago. I know that living God's way won't be the path of least resistance, but it will be the path with the greatest reward. This is a time where the world tells us we need to be free, where we need to do what feels right, and don't worry about look into the future, seeing the consequences that are going to come, or seeing what the trouble your actions right now are going to cause. But if you sit back and watch just about anything on TV or read something in the tabloids or on social media, look at it through the lens of being a Christian. It is glaring that people, if people just had God in their lives, how stark the difference would be in what we see in our world around us, what we hear people's troubles about. You know, 1 Peter 3 talks about some things that would improve so many people's lives and their relationships. Whether it's talking about respecting each other, you know, you can, if you communicate open and honestly, how much better that is for your relationship, honoring your partner, being godly in your everyday conduct. All of these ways would change people's lives in a positive way, would change their relationships, their relationships with their spouses, their relationships with their families, because God's way is better. When it comes to marriage and sexual purity, God's way is better. Don't be tricked into what seems better at the time. The only way that is better is God's way. You know, to us, these things seem so evident to us as we look on others. You know, it's easy to form our opinions about people, about situations, about relationships. Sometimes, though, we're so blinded about those same things for ourselves, to the point that we're just like the image painted in Matthew chapter 7, with we got the speck in somebody else's eye, but yet we have the beam in our own eye. We don't want to be like that. You know, Isaiah, we'll turn over real quick to Isaiah 53. Isaiah 53, excuse me, Isaiah 55 is where we're going. Some of this probably came to mind when we started this lesson and with something I mentioned, but in Isaiah 55, we're going to read verses 8 and 9. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. We've got the secret to life right here. God has told us how to live a great life. He has told us what it takes to make him happy, and what will make us happy. But we have to read it, we have to study it, and we have to apply it every single day. So as we finish up today, something that I want you to take with you is, don't let sin make your life harder than it needs to be. Make the decision to do life God's way. If we make that decision to do life God's way, you'll be rewarded beyond your wildest dreams. And those of you, I mean, we've all made those decisions. And when we've seen how much better they are than the poor decisions we've made, it makes you that much more excited to do life God's way. So if we can help you grow in your spiritual journey, or if we can help you start your spiritual journey and begin to do life God's way, we would be more than happy to help you do whatever we can. Please reach out to us. Please let us know what we can do for you, because doing life God's way is the best way. We can all attest to that when we've made those good decisions. I hope that this morning has been an encouragement to you. And it's not ideal that we're not able to be together, but know that we're praying for you. Know that we are keeping you at the foremost of our thoughts. We hope that you enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we let higher thoughts